Good morning. We're going to begin now a Sichah, Parshas Mishpatim. The Sichah is printed in Chelik Tes Zayin. It's the fifth Sichah. It begins with page 275. Now, in order to properly understand the Sichah, I want to just read a few psukim at the end of this week's Parsha. At the end of this week's Parsha, in Perek Chof Dalid, Pasuk Tesvav, the Pasuk says, Vayal Moshe Elahar, Moshe ascended the mountain, Vayichas Ha'onon Es Hahar, and the cloud then covered the mountain. Now, Rashi says, Vayichasei Ha'onon, one more pasuk, Vayishkan Kved Hashem al Har Sinai, the glory of Hashem rested on Har Sinai, Vayichasei Ha'onon Sheishes Yomim, and the cloud covered the mountain for 6 days, Vayikra El Moshe Bayem Hashvi Mitech Ha'onon, and on the seventh day, Hashem called to Moshe from within the cloud. Then the pasuk says, pasuk Zayin Umara Kved Hashem Keish Echeles B'Reish Har, the appearance of the glory of Hashem before the Yidden was like a all-consuming fire, B'Reish Har, on top of the mountain, L'Einei B'nei Yisrael, amongst everybody. Then the pasuk concludes, and this is the end of the parsha. Vayavei Moshe b'Seicha Onon, Moshe entered through the cloud, Vayal es Sahar, and he ascended the mountain. Vayihi Moshe b'Har Arboim Yom, Moshe was on the mountain for 40 days, Arboim Laila, and 40 nights. So just in short, the pasuk says that we just read 4 psukim. Moshe ascended the mountain. This mountain was covered with a cloud. The Kved Hashem was on Har Sinai for 6 days. The cloud was covering Har Sinai for 6 days. Moshe was called by Hashem on the 7th day from within the cloud. The appearance of the Kved Hashem was like a fire, a burning fire. It was a consuming fire. And then the pasuk again says that Moshe went into the Onon, and Vayala Sahar, and he ascended the mountain. So Rashi says Vayichasei Ha'onon, and the cloud covered from 6 days. So Rashi brings down a machlekes, and he says some of them say these are the 6 days from Rosh Chodesh Sivan until the giving of the Torah. And some people say that it was 6 days after Matan Torah. So in other words, that the on the 7th day Moshe went Miteicha Onon, Moshe went up. When was that? So some opinions say it was Rosh Chodesh, from Rosh Chodesh Sivan till Zion. For the first 6 days, the Onon was on the mountain, and Moshe was called on Zion to go. Sivan, yeah. Other opinions hold no, that when the pasuk says that Vayikra Moshe Bayem Hashvi Mitech Ha'onon, when was Moshe called? This was 7 days after Matan Torah. Now, next Rashi says Vayikra Moshe Bayem Hashvi. So Rashi says that Moshe was called on the 7th day in order to tell him about the 10 Commandments. And although not only Moshe, but all the Yidden were standing, nevertheless, the Torah gives special honor by mentioning his name. But some say, Vayichasei Ha'onon, that Moshe, so this is what I said, Moshe for 6 days after, this was after the Seres HaDibros, which were at the beginning of the 40 days that Moshe went up to Har Sinai to receive the Shnei Luchos. So the Torah teaches you that whoever enters the Shekhinah requires prior separation 6 days before. That's the machlekes. Now, then comes the last Rashi, and this is very negate to our Sichah. B'teich Onon, Rashi says, what does it mean? Moshe Rabbeinu went into the cloud. So Rashi says the cloud was made of a kind of thick smoke, and the Eibishter made a path for Moshe through it. So that's the pasuk. Now, based on this, we're going to begin now the Sichah. Page 275. B'siyam asedra, if the verter b'seicha onon, zok Rashi, onon zeh kimin oshan hu v'chuli. Come on, sif base. At the end of this week's parsha, on the words like we just read, the last pasuk, that Vayove Moshe b'teicha onon, Moshe went into the cloud. So Rashi says this cloud was a kamin oshan, was a type of oshan. Oshan means smoke. The cloud was like it wasn't a regular cloud. It was a smoky cloud. So the Rebbe says, "Is in them that move on." This is not understood. Anon vert bechlal getaich volken. What does an anon mean? Anon is a cloud. An oshan meant, and what does oshan mean? Reich. Oshan means that smoke. And unochmer zizan fakerte eine von zweiten. Not only are they two different meanings, but the meaning is polar opposites. Why? Because onon vert geschaffen von mayim. Clouds are created from where? From water. When oshan, smoke, is created from eish, from fire, which is polar opposites. Hein, so now the Rebbe asks two questions. Von wann nimmt Rashi teichen do anan andre vi ibro? How does Rashi know over here that anan doesn't mean a cloud, it means smoke? Beis, was is da bechlal schwer im pshutische mikro, was Rashi darf es mefarsh sein? What is bechlal difficult in pshat of Rashi that compels Rashi to interpret bechlal the word of anan? Beis. Right, there's Rashi mamshich. Rashi continues and says, also the HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe shvil b'seichi. Hashem made a path for Moshe Rabbeinu. The marker from the Inyan is in Gemara. Now, the source of Rashi is from the Gemara in Yuma, Daf Daled Amud Beis. Aber dort kommt es als Atiritz auf der Stira zwischen zwei Psukim. Over there, the Gemara over there brings two Psukim, which seemingly is contradicting each other. And the Gemara asks, Siv, it says in Parshas B'Shalach, Pasuk Yudalid, Perak Yudalid, Pasuk of Beis, the Pasuk says, that Moshe was not able to go into the oil maid. Why? Because the cloud was there. So Moshe couldn't go into the oil maid because the cloud rested upon it. So what do we see from here? We see that when there's a cloud of Hashem, you can't go in it. Now, Ksiv, and another pasuk says in our parsha, that when there was a cloud of glory, when there was a cloud on the mountain, Moshe was able to go in the midst of the cloud. So make up your mind. When Hashem makes a cloud, can you go in it or can't you go in it? So the Gemara answers and says, the way Rabbi Shmuel, so Rabbi Shmuel taught, he says like this, Nemar kan betoich, it says in our parsha, in other words, it says, B'seicha non, v'nemar lahalon, it says in B'shalach, B'seich, Yavai b'nei Yisrael. Again, v'nemar lahalon b'seich, v'yavai b'nei Yisrael, b'seich hayom. So it says in our parsha B'seich. And it says in Parshas B'Shalach, by when the Yidden went into the Yamsuf, it says that they went in B'seich hayom. So he learns out from there, Ma lahalon shvil, just like by Kriyas Yamsuf. Hashem made a path for the Yidden to walk, Tiksiv. Like it says, and the water was a wall for them. Afkan, so too over here, Shvil, there was a path in the midst of the cloud. So over there, the Gemara gives that answer that Hashem made a Shvil to interpret and to answer the contradiction of these two psukim. Now, the Rebbe says, why can Rashi not say that? Aber in Pirish Rashi, da kemenit lernen as is oisen the mitzvah for inference distir. We can't say that Rashi over here is coming to resolve this paradox between these psukim. Why? While the stira wird erst später in pasuk v'layochal Moshe in Parshas Pekudei. This question that the Ben Chamish and Mikra is going to have is only going to be when he learns Parshas Pekudei, because he doesn't know this pasuk beforehand. So Rashi should have answered the stira in Parshas Pekudei. So therefore, Muslim Zogin, you have to say, as those was Rashi darf bavarnen wie hat Moshe gekent rein in dem anan. Also the HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe shvil. This that Rashi bechlal has to bavarn, and that Moshe Rabbeinu went into the shvil, went into the path, is not der farva speter zok the pasuk v'layochal Moshe love kishachin olav hana, not from the pasuk that we see later on that Moshe wasn't able to go into the cloud because the cloud was hovering There, rather, you have to say is because from this pasuk we see that Moshe was not able to go into the cloud. So the Rebbe says, 1 second. It's tamua. It's wondrous. Rashi's mefarish freer. Rashi explains beforehand in Parshas Yisrei, Perek Chof, Pasuk Yudches. Rashi says, Diverto Moshe nigash el Arafel. It says that Moshe approached the Arafel, as das made lifnim mishalish mechitzas cheshech anav Arafel, which means that Moshe went in within 3 partitions. You have the partition of darkness, you have the partition of a cloud, and you have the partition of Arafel. And Moshe Rabbeinu was able to pass through all of them. Das says, as Moshe is durchgegangen nit bloß durch cheshech v'anan, that Moshe was able to pass through not only darkness and the cloud, nor euch durch Arafel, also through the Arafel. Was is Rashi taish dort over anan. Over there, Rashi says, what's Arafel? Rashi says it's a very thick cloud. Und von deswegen, nevertheless, Bavar nit Rashi wie azoi hat dort gekent durchgehen. Over there, Rashi does not clarify how Moshe was able to pass through this cloud. So this indicates, as by Mincha, Mishnah Mikra says, Mikara kin kashnit, Moshe can durchgehen dem inyan. So it's obviously understood that the Mincha Mishnah Mikra had no difficulty how Moshe Rabbeinu was able to pass through the cloud. Und wie mir zet bepashtus, as me ken durchgehen an anan, afilos is nicht in shvil. You see that people can pass through clouds even without a path, right? Airplanes go through clouds, helicopters go through clouds all the time. Hi, in Farvas Darf es bavornen by Anan and Uzra Pasuk. So therefore, why does Rashi need to Bechlal address the issue of how Moshe was able to go into Anan? So we have a few questions over here. Number one is, we asked that, how does Rashi saying that this Anan was a smoke? Chayra, Anan, a cloud comes from water, smoke comes from fire. It's 2 polar opposites. Why does Rashi B'chal have to explain something? And also, you have to say that Rebbe concluded that when Rashi says that Hashem made an Anan Zeh Kimin Ocean, he made a path for him, it's not because he's basing it on the Gemara, but rather it's pshat over here, you must say that Hashem made a path for him. Now, why did Hashem have to make a path for him? We know that Moshe Rabbeinu was able to go through the Anan, through the Arafel, which is a very thick cloud. And Rashi B'chlal over there doesn't say how was Moshe able to go through the cloud. Right? Why? Because everybody knows you can go through a cloud. So what's so difficult over here? The Rashi has to say that the cloud that Moshe Rabbeinu went through was Hashem made a path for him. Beis, Gimel, sorry. V'habir Bazeh. The explanation is as follows. The kasha v'shtelt sich da im Shudisha Mikra. The difficulty within Pshat is as follows. Ibal der Pasuk zog frier. Since the Pasuk says beforehand, which we read in the beginning of the Shir, Pasuk Tesvav, the Pasuk says, this is 4 Psukim before our main Pasuk that the Rebbe is focusing on. So he says, Ibal der Pasuk zog frier. Since the Pasuk says in Pasuk Tesvav, Vayichas ha'anan es ha'or, it says, the cloud enveloped, covered the mountain, as the har is given badek mitten onon, that the har Sinai was enveloped with the cloud, is dachmuven ma'atzmei as when vayal Moshe elahar. So it's obviously understood that when Moshe went up to the mountain, is arayin inem onon. So obviously, if the mountain is covered with the cloud, it's self-understood that if Moshe went ascended the mountain, obviously he went into the cloud. So the vos darf min makdim mefar zayin as vayavim Moshe b'seicha anan. So why does the pasuk have to say that Moshe went into the anan? That's what's bothering Rashi. The pasuk said beforehand, vayal Moshe lahar vayichas ha'anan nasahar, that the mountain was covered with the cloud. So why does the pasuk have to say vayavim Moshe b'seicha anan? That Moshe went into the cloud. We know from 4 psukim beforehand that the cloud was hovering over the mountain. So if Moshe ascended the mountain, obviously he went into the cloud. Now the Rebbe says in the brackets, Das was the pasuk chazud do iber vayal elahar. This that the pasuk says again that Vayal Elahor. In other words, you can ask the question, the Rebbe is bothered, why does it say Moshe b'Seicha Anan, that Moshe went into the Anan, if we know that there was a cloud on the mountain? So obviously he went b'Seicha Anan. So now the question is, why does the pasuk say Vayal Elahor again? It already says, the pasuk says in Tesvav, Vayal Moshe Elahor, Vayichas Ha'anan Esahar. So why does the pasuk have to say, literally 4 psukim later, and Moshe went into the mountain? And we know that. So the Rebbe says, das was the pasuk Chazir da Iber. Vayal Elahor nochtem v'yishtei shein fri Vayal Moshe Elahor Vayichas Ha'anan Yishleimer, like the Beit Deis was Rashi bring the Friedrich Basel. We can explain this based on the opinions of the 2 opinions which we read in Rashi in the beginning of this year. According to the first opinion, since the pasuk that Vayavi Moshe, that Moshe came and Vayal El Hahor was when? On the day of Matan Torah, Zayin, Sivan, after pasuk da Iberchazen Valen Mitten hat der pasuk Mafsek given mit dem Zman von Far Matan Torah. Since the pasuk interrupted itself by explaining an occurrence that happened prior to Matan Torah, so therefore the pasuk has to again say, so based on the opinion that holds that Moshe Rabbeinu went up on Zion, that's when he went up, when the pasuk says Vayal Elahor was Zion, so it makes sense to say pasuk Tesvav Vayal Moshe Elahor, which was when? On Zion Sivan. Pasuk the Zion is telling me Vayishkin Kved Hashem al Har Sinai V'Chaser Anan Sheish Yomim was before Har Sinai, was before Matan Torah. Umara Kved Hashem K'Shechels B'Shahar was before Matan Torah. So now that you started off with Matan Torah, then you spoke about things prior to Matan Torah. So the pasuk again has to tell you, I guess if it's not self-understood, that Vayal Elahor. Fine. And the Rebbe says also, according to the second opinion, how much more so? Was the Tzvei Mo Vayal Zayin Nit Zelba. According to the second opinion, the Vayal, the first Vayal and the second Vayal are B'chlal not the same Vayal. The Erste Ret wegen Aliyas Moshe Lahar gleich nach Matan Torah. In Parshas Tezvav, Vayal Moshe Lahar is speaking about the Moshe went up right after Matan Torah. Or the Vayal Moshe B'Seicha Anan Vayal Lahar, and this that it says again in Pasuk Yidches, that Moshe went on the mountain is given in them Yom HaShvi nach Matan Torah, which happened 7 days after Matan Torah. So the Rebbe says that the pasuk has to repeat itself, that Moshe went up, that's not a shayla. However way you're going to learn when he went up. Either Vayal, it says it again because the Torah was mafsik to speak about things before Matan Torah, or the second Vayal, according to the second opinion, is a different time. Moshe went up right after Matan Torah one time on the mountain, and then 7 days later he went up again. So the Rebbe says, back in page 277, is der fun mashma, as beteich on the main der pasuk zogin, as der Anan was steht da, is nicht der selber Anan was wird der Mond in the friedige psukim. So now, the fact that the pasuk says twice, in pasuk Tesvav, Vayichas Ha'anan Esahar, that Moshe went up, Vayal Moshe Elahor, that Moshe went up to the mountain, and then 4 psukim later it says again, Vayal Moshe B'Seicha Anan. Sorry. That he went up into the Anan, so it must be that Moshe, that it's 2 different types of, that the Anan in Pasuk Yud Ches is a different Anan. So Meridi Gechidish. Rashi is bothered. Why does it say twice? We know already that the Anan covered the mountain. So Vayal Moshe Elahor, Moshe went up to the mountain, and then the Pasuk says, Vayavei Moshe B'Seicha Anan, Moshe went into the Anan. So the question is, obviously Moshe went into the Anan. We know that the mountain was covered with the cloud. So why does it say in the last pasuk Vayavei Moshe B'Seicha Anan? Must be the Anan over here is something else. Rashi says. Vertach di Shaila, was is given of der Anan? So what was Anan is a cloud. So this cloud is different than the first cloud. So therefore Rashi says, Anan zeh from them pasuk is kimin oshnu. Therefore Rashi says like this. Since the pasuk repeats and says that Moshe went into the Anan, the Torah doesn't have to tell me that. Rashi's bothered by that. Rashi says, you know what? This Anan is not a regular Anan. It's Anan kimin oshnu. It's a cloud, which is a smoky cloud. That Anan was vert der Mond in the Friedike Psukim on Parshas, darf Rashi nicht mefarish sein, weil es ist moving bepashtus. So now we asked, why doesn't Rashi say how could Moshe Rabbeinu go into the clouds? Rashi's not bothered by that. Because everybody understands how a person can go through a cloud. It's not a problem. In the previous psukim, we're talking about a regular cloud, which had the glory of Hashem in it. And as we know, there was a cloud of glory that, as Hashem we know this cloud of glory led the Yidden during the day, and they had a pillar at night leading them where to go. However, the anan that in our pasuk Yitches, you must say it's a different type of cloud. Otherwise, why would the Torah tell me that Moshe Rabbeinu went into the cloud? It's self-understood. So therefore, Rashi has to say that here we're talking about an anan, which is kimin, which is a kind of smoke. Daled. Now, so
the question is over here. He's saying there are not two separate ones. One is that.
The first
regular is a regular.
Exactly. The first Vayal Moshe Lahar is talking about that he went on the mountain, and the mountain he went into the cloud on the mountain.
The second one was
Kamin Oshan, yeah. Now, how does Rashi know? So I understand why Rashi has to tell me that Anan in the Pasuk Yitches is a different type of Anan, but how does Rashi know it's Kamin Oshan, it's a kind of smoke? So the Rebbe says in Dala, the Hechach from Rashi as Anan Zeh, Kamin Oshan is from the Psukim Gufa. So the Rebbe says that Rashi's proof that Anan is a kind of smoke is derived from the Psukim themselves. And the Rebbe explains. Tvishim vayikra al Moshe un vayave Moshe b'seicha Anan is that pasuk umara kved Hashem ke'ish echeles b'reish shahar. Now, from the pasuk, like we read 4 psukim, that Moshe was called. Moshe went up on the mountain, and the mountain was covered with a cloud. And then the pasuk says that the umara kved Hashem ke'ish echeles, the appearance of the glory of Hashem was like a ke'esh echeles, which is like a fire which consumes, and this fire which consumed was b'reish shahar le'enei b'nei Yisrael. Now, so the Rebbe says it's nicht verstandig that pasuk hat gedarf stehen far vayikra Moshe behemshich zu vayishkin kved Hashem abtachendik as der mara from kved Hashem is given ke'esh echeles. So the Rebbe says is that before you tell me vayikra Moshe b'yem hashvi, you should first say that Umara Kved Hashem Ke'esh Echeles, that this mountain had a fire which was consuming the mountain, and then tell me that Moshe was called. Tell me Vayishken Kved Hashem al Har Sinai, and then Moshe was called, and then you're telling me weiter descriptions on the mountain. First tell me Bechlal, the mountain and the description of the mountain, and then tell me Vayikra Moshe. Why does it say Umara Kved Hashem Ke'esh Echeles after Vayikra Moshe? Now the Rebbe says, "Shloimy Beilei today as Vayikra Moshe is given B'yem Hashvi Nachman Teira." Needless to say, according to the opinion that holds that B'yem Hashvi was that Moshe was called on the 7th day after Mount Teira. When the Eibishter had gerufen Moshe Erzal Rufkin Mekabels and the Luches. When Moshe Rabbeinu was called to go receive the Luches, Vayave Moshe is given the Enfer Oif their Kriya. So the Vayave Moshe was an answer on the Kriya. So it doesn't make sense to separate between Vayikra Moshe and Vayave Moshe. It doesn't make sense to say Moshe Rabbeinu was given a commandment and right away it should have said Vayave Moshe. No, Vayikra Moshe b'yem hashvi miteichanan. And then it's like you get a little sidetracked. Umara kved Hashem ke'ish echeles and then Vayave Moshe. Why are you saying that? Either say that right after Vayikra Moshe, you should say Vayave Moshe b'seichanan. Why are you pasuk Yud Zayin should have been before this whole Vayikra Moshe? Now the Rebbe says, according to the first opinion, that the first opinion holds that we read in Rashi that Moshe, Hashem called Moshe, not that Hashem called Moshe separately, but with all the Yidden. Why does he say Moshe's name? Because he's giving special covet to Moshe. Nicht as der Eibishter hat gerufen Moshe aruf zu gehen Eifhar, that not that Moshe Rabbeinu that he was called, Vayikra Moshe means he was called to go on the mountain. Und Vayave Moshe b'Seich Haaron is an inyan nit verbunden mit Vayikra Moshe b'Seich Haaron, and that it comes out that Vayave Moshe has nothing to do with Vayikra Moshe. Von deswegen is Eich Mer Masim as the Tier inyan umarak Kved Hashem soll stehen gleich mit Hemshach zu Vayishkin Kved Hashem. Even according to that opinion, it still makes sense that the pasuk umarak Kved Hashem should be a Hemshach als Vayishkin Kved Hashem. So therefore the Rebbe says, the Rebbe learned Rashi as the pasuk Umara. Now, so if I'm bringing the pasuk of Umara in middle, Rashi says, 1 second. Umara must be a preface. Zum pasuk Vayave Moshe b'Seich Haaron. As Menam is mit was der Anan is anders von dem Anan, was steht free in pasuk. The Rashi is explaining to you how this Anan is different than the other Ananim of the psukim beforehand. Was der Fard after pasuk Magic Vayave Moshe b'Seich Haaron, and therefore the pasuk has to stress. The last pasuk has to say that Moshe went into the Anan. The Anan is that they tzov from them Eishei Cheles. This cloud is a outcome of what? Of the fire which was burning. As Kimin Usher, it was a lot like a smoke. Was gekommen from the Eishei Cheles, which came from the fire which consumes. Was steht in Friedrich pasuk. So the Rebbe asked in Dalid, how does Rashi know it was Kimin Usher? The Rebbe says very simple. The fact that the Torah puts pasuk Yud Zayin before Vayikra al Moshe b'yem Hashvi, he says Vayikra al Moshe b'yem Hashvi. L'cher should have said right away Vayave Moshe. Why does the pasuk say Umarak Kved Hashem ke'Eishei Cheles? It's telling me how Rashi knows that it was Kimin Ushan. You know it was Kimin Ushan? Since there was a fire consuming the mountain, and the pasuk says Vayave Moshe b'Seich Haaron, he went into the cloud. And what type of cloud? It's a different cloud that we spoke about in pasuk Tesvav. Must be the fact that the Torah is mocked him, Ke'eishei Cheles, it must be that this is talking about a smoky cloud.